Hi, Suman.
Yeah,
How are you doing? Hope you're feeling better.
thanks for asking. I'm feeling much better now.
That's great to hear. That's awesome. Hi, Chetna. Suman, do we want to get started or do you want to wait for a few seconds?
So maybe we'll get
Yep.
started. And yeah, I see people pouring in slowly. Okay, so welcome back to Nothing Changes Until You Do. The last few sessions we had talked about, why is self-awareness very important for building empathy and relationships. And in the last one, we said, okay, now that we've spoken quite a bit about that why part, um, let's look at how do we really go about building empathy, right? So today, I'm going to talk about that. Now, there is a lot to speak about when it comes to empathy. Also, the topic is a great energizer for me. So here is what I'm thinking. First, we'll do this over a few sessions because there's a lot to cover. In collecting my thoughts and putting them under some heads, when I was doing some groundwork for this, I created a simple framework, which I'm calling ABCDE. A for awareness, B for biases, C for caring, D for developing relationships, and E for established connection. We'll see how much we progress today, and we'll thereafter move to a big one called listening. Right, and listening is a big one. There's a lot to do and learn, unlearn when it comes to listening. And then finally, we'll explore what organizations can do to build a culture of empathy. Okay, so that's kind of a bit of the context. So before I jump in, Divya, does that sound good?
It absolutely does. And I totally appreciate why empathy is such a vast topic. So it'll take a couple of sessions to cover. Absolutely.
S- Super, super. So let me start with the first one, which is A or awareness. And every time I start talking of awareness, because ultimately I think everything goes back to that. So how is it linked to empathy? So we need to be aware of how others perceive us, right? For instance, we might feel we are empathetic, but do others feel so? We might feel we are good listeners, but do others think so? There can always be a big gap. For instance, I'll give you some examples. Let's say I see myself as very focused and efficient, but others see me as cold and robotic. Let's say I see myself as perceptive and thorough. Others see me as cynical and risk averse, right? I see myself as confident and assertive. Others see me as stubborn and arrogant. These are all very thin lines. Now, I might have a certain notion about myself, but the way the other person is perceiving it can be quite different. So it all starts with awareness. So if I have those feelings that I'm efficient, I'm thorough, I'm perceptive, and I'm all these good things, that itself is a stumbling block because I feel I'm okay. So we need to start moving away from maybe I'm not okay, maybe others not think that I'm not okay. So that's the starting point. So again, it's about empathy. Sorry, it's about awareness. Okay. Now that we've built the awareness, I go to the B, which is biases. And I think we all have our biases. What we need to do is to get out of our shoes, right? We say that we need to get into the other person's shoes. Metaphorically, that's what we say. And I say, you know what? To get into the other person's shoes, first we have to get off our shoes. Which means what? Which means that we need to get out of our heads. Many of us just live in our heads. There's too much of mental chatter, too much happening. We're too engrossed with ourselves. There's a beautiful quote which says, the quieter you become, the more you can hear. And the quieter we become is actually a function of that mental chatter, right? So it's important to quieten our mind. And again, that's a huge topic in itself. It'll call in mindfulness. It's a lifelong journey. But the key point is there's no way I can empathize with somebody else unless I quieten my own mind. So that's first point. Second point is we need to stop labeling people, and we do this all the time. Okay. So before we meet a guy, oh, this guy is negative, or this guy is an adversary, or this guy is an enemy, this guy is a troublemaker, this guy is irritating. The point is, and we all end up doing it, right? It's okay to have our likes and dislikes because end of the day we are human. We will have our likes and dislikes. But the only way we can get around this is to depersonalize the situation, right? Um, are we able to see, go beyond the person and see what that person is trying to say? And I know this is very difficult, but it's absolutely critical in order to build empathy. And because there are other biases linked to this, for instance, the confirmation bias, right? So we are very good at rationalizing, and I think we've spoken about it briefly earlier. Now, because of the confirmation bias, the moment we label people, the confirmation bias is only going to make it worse. So if I feel the other person is negative, I'm only going to see things in the other person which are more negative. And it will confirm to me that, yes, I was right in the first place. So these biases can create quite a bit of havoc. Okay. Now, how do we go around it? We need to suspend judgment. Again, easier said than done, which is observing without evaluating. The fundamental attribution error, which we had talked about earlier, is very critical here, right? So we attribute others' behavior to their personality and ours to our circumstances. Now, are we doing that? Are we aware that we are doing that? Because that's a bias. So all these biases we need to be aware of. By the way, it's only awareness. By definition, you cannot remove a bias. You can only be aware of. So that's the second part, which is about biases. The third part is about the C. We talked of A and B. The C is what I'm calling caring and consistent. And this is so true for all of us. See, it's not about blowing hot, blowing cold. Okay. It's not about shouting at somebody and saying, hey, hope you didn't mind. And we often see this kind of behavior, right? It's almost like we think we are being authentic, right? Well, if I shout on my people, that's who I am. That's not going to change. But now I'm being empathetic. So I shout and I go back and say, hey, hope you didn't mind. But it's not the same thing, right? Because essentially you are not creating a psychologically safe environment. It's also not about getting what you want, but being polite. See, it's empathy is not about just being polite. Let's say somebody comes to me and saying that, hey, a person has some problem at home and they want extended leave. And I don't react or anything, but I'm very clear that there's no way the person can get leave. Now, I'm not even listening to what this person is saying. I may be polite on the surface, but that's not caring, right? Caring, and when you have a genuine interest in the other person, you try to understand where the other person is coming from and be able to take a call at that point in time, looking at everything, right? Looking at the situation around you. So if I have to summarize it, what it essentially is that it cannot be blow hot, blow cold. It needs to be integrated. As somebody put it, it's hard skills with a soft touch. The two need to go hand in hand. You can't say one thing, you can't take a hard stand and then go and change it and say, now it's my turn to be soft. It doesn't work that way. But does that mean that you're always soft on people or lenient on people? Far from it, right? And that's where certain other things become important. For instance, can you have difficult conversations? It's not that you're shying away from the issue. If there is an issue, we need to take the issue head on. We need to address it. But is it possible to have it in a way that does not break the emotional connect? And that's where difficult conversations come in. And end of the day, it's about genuinely caring for people. It doesn't need to come at the expense of performance. If you genuinely care for somebody, they are more than happy to kind of work overtime and get the performance in. So the genuineness, and it's about being authentic. It's absolutely critical that when I go about, because people are very perceptive. If I fake it, people will instantly get it. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the C, which is A, B, and C. So let me take a pause here. How's this sounding? I mean, is this making sense?
It absolutely is, Suman, and you can see the chat as well. To see Chetna at any point, please feel free to jump in, or anyone, right? You can see the join speakers button, jump in, and we can chat. Suman, I think, and I haven't thought about it in this way, is, the first part you made about labeling, right? That is something that as humans we're wired to do. We're wired to, the way we make sense of the world is to categorize it into buckets, right?
Yes,
And we are
yes.
therefore constantly playing the categorizing game, and now that has
Hmm.
stretched into categorizing ourselves, categorizing every situation that we're in, right? Now that
Yeah.
itself is okay, but when it is in kind of mixed up with the second point that you raised, which is evaluating, right,
Hmm.
that it
Hmm.
becomes so dangerous, because you're now constantly, not just you're looking at the other people and saying good, bad, like me, not like me, bucket A, bucket B, bucket C, bucket D. So the labeling has gone one more step further into evaluating and then labeling as further from you or closer to you, right? And I
Absolutely.
think that evaluation, right, and because you get caught in the crossfire as well, in the sense that you're constantly doing it to yourself. You're looking at social media and you're saying, am I this happy? Am I this attractive? Am I this XYZ? And you're now then putting yourself in buckets, right? um,
Absolutely.
I think is massive. I think it has such big implications on the quieting the internal chatter that you talked about, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, you're absolutely right. And this, as I keep saying, these are, the soft stuff is the hard stuff. It's easier said than done. When we are labeling, we are actually already evaluated the other person. So the quote, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but one quote from Jiddu Krishnamurti of the Krishnamurti Foundation. He had said that observing without evaluating is the highest form of human intelligence. And I just love that quote, right? Um, Comes from wise men like that. We can only be aware of it. So the next time before we reach out and meet somebody, uh, you need to ask ourselves, am I labeling this guy or am I just suspending the judgment? That's going to be a key one.
I have a question here, which is just popping from the conversation as we
Sure.
speak. What's the role, or how do we evade the past experience that we build over a period of time? Even though I'm aware, even though I consciously keep making myself aware that I have to, drop biases, not judge, not label, but let's be honest, there's a reflection of past experiences that do come into play. How do
Hmm.
we, what's where does that play? As much as I might be aware, but no, some experiences of the past, that's also part of the awareness. So where does that land? I mean, your thoughts on that?
Definitely. No, that's a great question, Chetna. Um, let's say I'm having a conversation with you. Okay. Now that could be two things. One could be that I have some past with you, in the sense maybe something had not gone on well between you and me earlier, which could be playing on my mind, which will definitely impact this conversation, right? If it was not a pleasant experience, then there is all the more chances I'm going to start labeling, I'm going to get defensive, and the conversation is only going to go south. I think what I need to do is essentially be a lot more aware that fair enough, we need to have a common ground. And here we need to, as I said, we need to depersonalize the situation. I need
Mm-hmm.
to kind of tell myself, what, fair enough, what's happened has happened, but let's hear her out. Okay. And as much as possible. And I'm not saying it's fully possible because it's all conditioning. It's happened in the past. But as much as possible, I need to be aware to be depersonalize it. But it could also be that something that you mentioned, I don't have a background with you, but maybe something has happened in the past for me where I was let down or betrayed or whatever. I had a very scarring experience, right? And which is now becoming a limiting belief for everything that's happening, right? So
Yeah.
let's say you say something and I don't trust you just because, I had trusted somebody else in the past and that didn't work out, right? So it could be two different situations. And in that case, also, I think the only thing that will help us is our being awareness, is our being highly aware, right? Just because somebody has betrayed your trust in the past, does it mean that you stop trusting people going forward? You could, but that's at your own peril, because end of the day, we need to trust people. How you go about doing it, and it's not, and there is something called smart trust. It's not like a blind trust in people, right? But at the end of the day, I need to trust, and I need to believe in the power of trust, what is called the reciprocity of trust, because trust works both ways. If I trust you, you trust me. That's called the reciprocity of trust. So that's a kind of a short answer from my side. I hope I've been able to address the question.
Yeah. Yep.
Chetna, and also I think to just to add to that bit, so in behavioral sciences, right, we talk so much about the power of the non-conscious mind, right, because it's doing most of the heavy lifting, and a lot of the time we're not even aware of what is driving the things we say or the things we do, and it's a lot of the baggage that you talked about, right, Chetna? So the whole point that we keep talking about is let that take over. They call it system one versus system two, and all of that. If you read Kahneman and so on and so forth, right? The point is that we let automatic processing take over, right? So a lot of the time, the system one is running the show, and you're reacting more than even evaluating. You're reacting, right, to whatever is in front of you, and all of your beliefs and mental models come in full flow to enable that reaction. I think even now in behavior science, who believes in the power of the non-conscious so much, they're trying to bring things to the conscious mind. They're trying to say, slow down. They're trying to say, don't react, be mindful. So everywhere it goes around and comes to the thing of being mindful of the reason that you take a decision, and the factors that are influencing that decision. And it's much easier said than done. It's super hard to be aware of why your baggage is influencing a certain thing you do or say, right? But
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's an ongoing.
Yeah, that's a hard skill.
It is. And all of these are very hard to develop and it takes time. And that's why I keep saying awareness because uh, that's what's going to be the game changer. Divya, thanks for bringing in that perspective. Very interesting one. And when you said we are reacting, to me, reaction is automatic, right? Because you're not thinking, as opposed to when you're responding, and that's when your awareness kicks in. So I think to me, that's the real fundamental shift. Okay, great. Um, So moving on to the next one, which is about developing relationships. So here I think we need to get to know the other person more than a resource. Okay, so let me narrate a short story. Years back, there was an important project to be delivered at work, and the whole team was burning the midnight oil to reach the go live. One team member, let's call him Suresh, was a great performer. We finished late one night, and I asked everyone to come in early the next morning for an important meeting at 9. The next morning at 9, Suresh was missing. The meeting proceeded, and I was, to be honest, I was a bit miffed with him. I decided to take it up with him when I met him next. Fortunately, I spoke to someone else who just casually said, "Hey, Suresh stays in Hosur." And by the way, I'm in Bangalore, right? And Hosur is actually in Tamil Nadu, so it's quite a distance. Poor fellow couldn't have made it at 9 a.m. That really got me thinking. This simple thing taught me an important lesson. In fact, a few important lessons. Lesson number one, it's important to know your team members as people, not just resources. The second lesson is your best people will not tell you their challenges. The onus is on you, the leader, to find out about their world. You might think it's a good relationship, but if it's transactional, there is work to be done to bring in intimacy. And this is a point which I often discuss in workshops with senior leaders saying, most people feel that the relationship is fine, but the point is, if they dig deeper, they realize it's very transactional. And my point is, the moment you realize it's transactional, it's not good enough. There needs to be, for emotional connect to develop, there needs to be a certain level of connection and intimacy. So that is absolutely critical. So that's really about developing relationships. The fourth is about establishing connect, right? So especially today virtually, right? Everything's happening virtually. So for instance, a simple thing, let's say I pick up the phone, I'll get on a call and say, "Hey, how are you?" Now, often it's like a figure of speech, right? But am I really expecting the person to tell me how the person is right at that point in time? We need to do more check-ins, right? Uh, Maybe ask for permission. And this is all about empathy. Let's say I want to give a message to the other person. Now, when the person is face to face, I don't think about it because I'm in a room with this other person and I know there's nobody else around. But on a Zoom call, I need to ask for permission because I don't know what else is happening. First of all, is this person in the right frame of mind to receive the feedback? Maybe there's somebody else in the room. Maybe there's somebody sitting next to this person. So asking for permission. We need to get out of this thing of problem solving mode. Often we are in this problem solving mode, right? So let's say somebody's upset that they lost their dog, and I could just say, hey, why don't you just get another dog, right? And I think I'm trying to problem solve, but it really takes away from empathy. Look for similarities in people. Again, a tough one to do, not differences, because ultimately you have a common goal. Yeah. At work, it could be a difficult partner or difficult, team member. But the point is, whether it's you want your group or department or organization to be successful. So to that extent, the goal is aligned, right? The moment we start looking for similarities, not differences, that's again a big game changer. The next one I would say is bring in emotion. I think we talked about it earlier, that logic gets us to options, emotions get us to action. So we need to bring in emotion when we are having conversations with people. And finally, I would say be kind. Yeah. Don't make mistrust the starting point. I think Chetna, I was telling you about earlier in that, in the context of your question. Our job is to trust. The other person's job is to keep the trust, and that is about the reciprocity of trust. If you start with mistrust, I mean, that's the worst thing you can do to kind of, lose all emotional connect, and there goes your chances of building any empathy. So it's really about establishing a connect. So if I have to kind of quickly recap, what did we talk about? We said it starts with awareness. Be aware of your biases. Be caring and be consistent. When I say consistent, it's not about blowing hot and cold, right? Then we said D for developing relationships. You get to know the other person more than a resource, absolutely critical. And the fifth was establishing a connect. Okay, so let me stop there. What we'll probably do is take it up again, and we'll probably move into the listening part in our next session. We have a little over a couple of minutes left, but let's open it up for some discussions and Q&A.
Yeah, Suman, I think as you were speaking and you were covering D&E, which is developing relationships and establishing connection, it kind of took me back to the fact that, of course, one is to do that with other people, but you have to do that with yourself as well. Which kind of ties back to the quieting the mental chatter bit, right? And it also
Yes,
ties back to
yes.
the fact that, like in the airplanes, right? And you first put on the mask for yourself and then you help others. If that bit of, disquiet in your emotional state is there, right? It's very hard for you to kind of also empathize, right? So I think there's a little bit of that involved as well. I should go look up some papers, but this is just a hypothesis, right? But yeah, that's something.
No, I'm so happy you mentioned that, because today only I was thinking about that exactly same metaphor about the putting on the mask. In fact, they say help yourself before you help the child who's traveling with you. And I think this metaphor is very applicable even when it comes to awareness, right? So before we try to help somebody else or solve their problem, we need to look at ourselves first and to ask ourselves, are we doing okay? And that again goes back to self-awareness.
Yes. Chetna, do you
Yeah, so I mean, quite agree with you, Divya. There are so many great points today. As I said, like my thought was coming from how do you drop past reflections, but yes, totally agree that one takeaway I'll say it all starts with awareness, and self awareness is key. So keep reminding yourself. That's what I'll take back from this conversation.
Super. Okay, so I think we're good. If there are no further questions, we are almost out of time. So we'll see you back in the next week.
Thank you. This was great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Simi, and all the other listeners. Thank you, Chetna, and thanks, Suman.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.